on sustaining a focus on customer experience to drive sustainable growth, please welcome someone who you've already heard has worked across the globe deploying CX tools and methodologies, an internationally renowned speaker and blogger on the subject of CX, was also the first to become a certified customer experience professional, CCXP, authorized resource and training provider. His book, Customer What? The Honest and Practical Guide to Customer Experience, has received international acclaim. He's here with us right now. If you are ready, and I am, please welcome with a loud round of applause, Global Customer Experience Specialist, Customer Experience Consultancy Limited. Please put your hands together for Mr. Ian Golding. Welcome, Ian. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Keisha. Thank you for such a lovely introduction.
Thank you for being here. And we know it's really early, but the digital world allows us to connect
Absolutely.
at different times of the day from different corners of the world. So welcome.
Thank you so much. And coffee solves everything at this time of the morning, so we'll be fine. Right, good. So let me bring my presentation onto the screen, and good morning officially to all of you. Thank you once again to Keisha for such a lovely introduction, and congratulations to Harish and the entire CFEST team for bringing this together, because I know that this is being watched not just in India, but across the world. And as a Brit, I also have to say that the Indian cricket team, please treat England gently today, but that's a different subject. It is a real pleasure to be sharing my thoughts with you at a time when we are coming up to the anniversary of the start of one of the most challenging periods that the world has ever faced, certainly in recent memory. And the world as we know it today is challenged in a way that no one ever quite thought it would be, from an economic perspective and from a health perspective. And these challenges have led to so many amplified issues in the world of business and for human beings all across the globe. During the last 12 months, human emotion has been challenged in ways that I certainly didn't think we would see. And as we sit here today, there are people who are still in the very depths of despair. There are people who actually have thrived during this period. There are people who have been able to adapt or pivot, which is a word that's become very popular over the last 12 months, and have really moved forward in a way that they wouldn't have imagined. But one thing is for certain, the experiences that organizations deliver to their customers have become increasingly important in the last 12 months. And so I want to start this morning by reflecting on just how far the subject of customer experience has come, not just in the last 12 months, but over the last 30 years or so. Because customer experience as we know it today has been evolving over the last 30 years. Now, the irony of what I've just said is that customer experience has always existed, but it was really only with the advent of direct marketing that customer experience as we know it today started to come into place, evolving into CRM until eventually in 2011, for the first time, CX becoming ingrained in the language of organizations around the world. Why 2011? Well, because in 2011, for the first time, CX became an acronym, and it became an acronym with the formation of the first ever professional association, representing the profession that customer experience has now become. The CXPA, the Customer Experience Professionals Association, was founded in 2011. Coincidentally, I first had customer experience in my job title in 2005. So it has been around for a long time. But why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because as we sit here in 2021, 10 years after the advent of the Professional Association, we've continued to evolve. Because arguably, no longer are we just focusing on customer experience, because over the last 2 to 3 years, the increasing significance of the employee experience has risen to the very forefront of organizations' minds. And as a result, today, the focus for organizations shouldn't just be on the customer experience. It shouldn't just be on the employee experience. If this pandemic has taught us nothing else, it has taught us of the significance of the human experience. And so what we need to ask ourselves is if we're going to be able, as organizations, to deliver experiences that genuinely put human beings at the forefront of people's minds, where are we today? How well are we doing this? Are we evolving? This is what I call the customer experience continuum. And I've been sharing this for almost 10 years. That what organizations around the world need to ask themselves is, where do they sit on this evolutionary line? Most organizations today, despite the fact that this profession has been recognized for the last 10 years, most organizations today are still sitting on the left-hand side of this, delivering what we call random or unexpected experiences. The aspiration is to get to the right-hand side of this continuum, because on the right-hand side of this, it is where we're able to differentiate ourselves, not just on our products and services, but on the entire experience. And that is the aspiration. This is where the most customer-centric organizations in the world sit. But sadly, right now, most organizations still on the right-hand side of this continuum were created that way. The majority of organizations who've been talking about customer experience for many years now are still to get there. Legacy organizations are still struggling to get to the right-hand side, because it's only on the right-hand side that our organizations will be in a position to achieve sustainable growth. And so it is really important that we recognize what is the experience that we want our customers to have. Because the middle of this continuum is where we're able to define that, what we call the intentional or desired experience. And this pandemic, once again, has really increased the significance of organizations needing to ask themselves, do we know what experience we want our customers to have? Because even if we think we do, the challenge with customer experience as a discipline, as a profession, as a science, as I call it, is that what your customers wanted from you 12 months ago has now changed. And this is why the profession that customer experience has become is so important. Because it is disciplined professionals with an understanding of the competencies that enable an organization to get to the right-hand side of this, that are the ones who are able to adapt continuously to the changing environment, the changing circumstances that will always be happening to us at any time, let alone these challenging times that we live in today. And the reason that these times are so challenging isn't the pandemic itself, but it is the increasing importance of changing human emotion. What the last 12 months have told us is that human emotion is rapidly changing and is hugely affected by the changing environment around us. When the pandemic hit, human beings around the world instantly panicked. They were shocked, they were angry, they were fearful, they were uncertain. And as this period of our lives has continued, the emotion has continued to change. There are still millions of people around the world scared about the future, fearful for what is to come, with no expectation or little expectation that there is even a light at the end of the tunnel. And it is so important that your organization, whatever industry you happen to be in, is even more conscious than ever before of the emotion your customers are going through. Because what we need to understand is that if we continue to do the things we always did, that may well not allow us to adapt to these changing emotions. And what's vitally important is that whatever is happening around the world, whenever it is happening, we are able to understand what it is that is right for us to do. This is a very interesting matrix that I came across recently. And I've put the hyperlink to this at the bottom of this slide because I think it's important for you to look at the source of this information. But what I've just said aligns to what you see on this slide. What organizations need to ask themselves is, have they been doing the right thing? Because during this pandemic, the organizations that have been doing the right things for the right reasons are the ones that are very likely to sustain themselves long into the future. As we saw things change rapidly, those organizations who quickly adapted, who said to their customers, don't worry, we're here for you. We will support you. Even if that meant having a negative financial effect on them in the short term, they are the ones who are likely to succeed in the future. Because the most important element of all experiences is the emotional element. What your customers remember about their experience. And because human emotion has been amplified, what your customers are going to remember about the last 12 months are those organizations who adapted, who did the right thing for the right reason. And that's what I want you to consider. What did your organization do? And do you have even the right structure, rigor to understand what you want your experience to be so you can manage that experience and ensure that you are always doing the right thing for the right reason? Over the last 9 years, I have been sharing with organizations around the world the need to have a very structured approach to managing the customer experience. So whatever's happening around us, we're able to pivot and adapt. And this is the framework that underpins the approach to customer experience that I advocate. These 3 parts of the framework, if your organization has something like this in place, they would have been able to adjust and adapt as things changed rapidly. The strategy part of my framework is 3 questions. Do we know who our customers are? Do we know what we want their experience to be? And does everyone in the organization know the role they play in delivering that experience? These are 3 fundamentally simple questions, but many organizations still to this day can't answer them. And that's a huge challenge, a huge problem, especially when things change so rapidly. The second part of the framework is the vital part, because this measurement part of the framework is all about determining how capable your organization is at doing the first part. This is where that thing called the customer journey comes in, because it is the customer journey, whether an organization knows it or not, that is bringing the experience to life for your customers right now. And this is all about not just mapping the customer journey, but managing the customer journey, an interconnected cycle of activities that enable us to see what the journey looks like, so we're able to measure the journey, to identify and address our priorities. And if that kind of discipline had been in place 12 months ago, your organization would have known immediately where it is that you would have needed to focus to ensure that you are still able to meet the needs and expectations of your customers. But there is a third part of the framework that is as important as the other two, because we can't do any of this without people. And it doesn't matter how digitally enabled an organization becomes, we cannot deliver experiences without our people. And this third part of the framework, again, has become even more important than ever before, because our people have needed to be as focused on leaving customers feeling the way we want them to feel than ever before. But if we're not able to treat our people in the way we want our people to treat our customers, the rest of the framework is very challenging to keep in place. So with that in mind, an important question: how well are organizations, are industries around the world adopting an approach like this? Have organizations around the world been able to sustain their focus on customer experience during these unprecedented times? It's a vitally important question, because what these last 12 months have told us is that digital technology is and will continue to be a critical element, a critical competency enabling us to deliver experiences. But what the last 12 months have told us, as much as the importance of digital, is the importance of human interaction. Digital technology shouldn't be thought about as a way of eliminating human interaction. It shouldn't be thought of a way to save money. But digital technology, where it has been used in the right way, has enabled us to maintain human interaction. And the very fact that I'm talking to you now from the UK, and there are people all around the world listening to this right now, demonstrates that despite a pandemic, we are able to be closer together as human beings than ever before. But it's organizations that understand that are not putting technology first, but putting customers first, that are the ones that will win in the future. And to bring to life what I'm saying to you, and this is a saddening fact, there are still many, many organizations today whose people have never met a customer, whose employees have no idea what is going through the minds of their customers. And there is no better example of this than the pharmaceutical industry, an industry that is critical for us to get out of the mess that the world is in right now. But whenever I'm with a pharmaceutical company, I will always ask them the question: when was the last time you met a customer? Have you ever met one of these? A doctor, a nurse, a healthcare professional? And if you don't work in the pharmaceutical industry, It may surprise you to know that the majority of employees in pharmaceutical companies have never met one. The sales teams have, but those making strategic decisions, those determining things that will have an effect on the experience that these people have, far too often have never met one. And this is something that must change. And again, if this pandemic has taught us anything over the last 12 months, it has taught us of the importance of getting much closer to our customer, not as digital interactions, but as human beings. And to really bring this to life, I want to share something with you that is very personal to me, but it will really help me to stress the need to never, ever forget that businesses cannot exist. Any organization cannot exist without human interaction. This picture is a picture that I thought long and hard as to whether or not I should share it with you this morning. But this picture is of my mum and my dad holding hands. It is the last picture that I was ever able to take of my parents being together. Because at the end of January, sadly, my father lost his life. And the reason that I'm sharing this with you is that both of my parents contracted coronavirus in January, and they were both admitted to hospital at the same time. They were put in separate wards, and my father, his diagnosis was not good, and he wasn't given long. The reason I'm sharing this with you is because as his son, I needed to know, how was he doing? How was my mum doing? But try as I might, I could not find out anything. I could not get through to the hospital. No one would answer the phone. I emailed, I went on Facebook, I tried everything to find out how my parents were doing. Were they even still alive? And I could not get any response. The only way that I was able to do something was to almost force the door of the hospital down, to go in to find out what was happening. And when I went into the hospital and I managed to find a nurse who could help me, she was shocked that I wasn't able to interact with anyone, to get any information. And she arranged for my mum and my dad to meet each other for the final time so my mum could say goodbye. The reason I'm telling you this is that nurses, doctors, healthcare professionals are doing an astonishingly amazing job right now. But they are supported by administrators, supported by many people. But no one has really considered, what about the families? This isn't just about the patient. What about the sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers of the people who aren't well? They need to be thought about just as much as the patients who they're looking after. But no one had. And the effect it had on me and my family was huge. It is so vitally important that we are thinking about all human beings. We're thinking about all human interactions. Because coming back to this point about how can an organization sustain itself, whatever's happening around it, the most important underlying principle of all experiences is the principle of empathy. Because there is a direct connection between empathy and sustainable growth. Because the better able an organization is at empathizing with its customers, the more likely it is that those customers will become fans, advocates of the organization. Fans become loyal. Loyal fans come back to you more often, tell others about you, and spend more money. And if that happens, you will grow. This last 12 months of our lives has seen the importance of empathy really become more significant than ever before. So to bring us to a conclusion, there are 5 things that I have been sharing with organizations and continue to share that I believe we must have at the very top of our minds as we continue to go forward and we come out of this pandemic. The first, it is so important that everyone in your organization understands the direction that you're going in. What is the future going to look like for our company? We need that message to be clearer than ever before. As I've already alluded, the importance of the employee experience is absolutely key. It has always been the case that the most customer-centric organizations in the world are those who recognize that the way they treat their people is the way their people will treat their customers. And they would argue that this is about employee first, not customer first. And so we need to ask ourselves, are we treating our people in a way that will enable them to leave our customers feeling the way we want them to feel? We need to move away from being task obsessed to being human obsessed. Too many organizations are not giving their people time to think. They are just getting them so focused on the execution of tasks, they're failing to understand who the human is that sits at the other side of the interaction. We must give our people time to think. And in addition to that, we need to become much, much better at listening. The days of traditional voice of the customer programs, the way we've been collecting feedback for many years, it needs to be rethought. We need to be much more sincere and authentic in listening to and acting on feedback from both customers and employees. And coming back to that point about technology, we are blessed in 2021 to have technology that we can only have, not even dreamed about 30 years ago. Many would never have imagined we could do the things that we can today. But it is so important that we're not led by the technology, but that we're led by the customer journey. Too many organizations are throwing technology at the customer journey without understanding what that journey actually is. We need organizations to understand what the customer journey is so that they can then better adopt technology to improve the ability of their processes to meet the needs and expectations of customers. As I've said, and I don't want to create a downbeat mood at the beginning of the second day of this festival, because yes, there have been some very dark, challenging times over the last 12 months. But actually, throughout all of the gloom, there have been many reasons to smile. Many reasons to smile because there are a huge number of organizations that actually have reconnected with their employees, reconnected with their customers, and have finally realized that they don't exist to make money. They exist to fulfill a purpose. And that purpose is to bring human beings together. And if even only a small proportion of organizations around the world have really been reminded of the importance of human interaction, then that is actually a wonderful thing. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me this morning. I hope you found it useful and insightful. And I wish everyone who is attending throughout today and tomorrow, and all of my fellow speakers, the best of luck. And I look forward to hopefully meeting you at some point in the future. Thank you so much. And on that note, I shall pass back to Keisha.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think, Ian, you kind of tugged at everybody's heartstrings. You connected with each one of us, making sure that, you know, the human connect, the human focus actually happens, and the right thing to do matrix. I think that there were so many highlights that I'm taking a lot back, and everybody who is watching us, who's watching us maybe from their home space or their home office, or even who has stepped into their office space, I'm hoping that there's a lot to take back, and I'm sure there are nods and smiles and applause coming out. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Keisha. It's a pleasure.
So before we go, Ian, we've got a small ritual that we've been doing since we are at the Customer Fest show. When I say customer, you say fest.
Okay. Are you good? I did see this with your previous speaker, so okay. I anticipated it was coming.
I'm glad. So let's go. All right, customer
first.
Customer
first.
I love it. All right, Ian. Thank you so much for joining us. Have yourself a wonderful day, and we've got to take back. All right, so from that amazing session with Mr. Ian Golding,